Welcome to another discussion about why learn a specific language. We put together a little sort of summary a few weeks back, talking about languages in general, learning languages. How do you make that decision? And it really felt like we wanted some specifics for some of the more common types of questions and languages that are out there. This time, we want to talk about SQL or SQL. And this is an interesting one because a lot of people are going to say, why would you choose SQL? Isn't it really just a database language? And more or less, yes, it is. You're not going to use SQL if you're not dealing with querying. That's what SQL stands for. It's structured query language. So it is a way to query against a database. Now, the good news is it is used in some form in most, if not all, databases. In all of the languages, all the databases I've dealt with, I have not come across one that doesn't actually recognize SQL. Even object-oriented databases that have their own query script usually and their own form, there is still a way to access the data with SQL. Now, it doesn't look the same because the structure is very different, but there is a rudimentary form of SQL that is used even there. Now, that's not to say that all of them are. There may be some that don't, but it is really the common language for working with data. And by working with, I mean like selecting it and doing inserts and updates and deletes and things of that nature, and aggregations and things that are, so it's not just pulling the data, but actually doing manipulations of the data. Now, SQL is one of the more common languages because data is everywhere. No matter what your application is, there's data there. Whether it's about your users, whether it's about your products, whether it's about your services, whether the data is the application, whether it is manipulating data, whether it is calculating against data, you're going to find data. And it's part of every application in some way, form, or fashion. And that may be because you need some reporting, or you may need to relate data back and forth, or you need to search through the data to find certain records, or you may need to combine or aggregate the data. The nice thing is with SQL, it does all of these things. It is the most sort of the common denominator of those types of queries, those types of tasks with data. And it is a solid, static kind of language. It is not changing a lot. While there are definitely extensions with various databases, if you look at the core SQL things you're going to do, it's going to look the same everywhere. The naming conventions may be a little different and things like that. But if you do select star from my table where my value equals 3, that's going to be almost identical in every single database you look at. Now, you may have to adjust stuff a little bit. There may be things around that, but usually if you take that and you run it, as long as those objects and things exist, you're going to get data back. And it's going to look basically the same from database to database to database. So that makes it in itself something that's nice to have because, like another language we've talked about, JavaScript, when you have something that you learn that is going to be used regardless wherever you're at, you get to keep using it. It's not going to get rusty. It's going to stay current. And it's something also probably because you're going to use it maybe on a daily basis. You're going to build your skills. You're going to build your confidence. You're going to master that sooner rather than later because you're actually putting it to use. Now, a thing about SQL that's interesting these days is because there are a lot of tools out there that allow you to quickly browse and work within data. They essentially hide the complexity, though, of the queries, and they sort of block you from more complex queries. But they do allow you to quickly go browse data. If you go to like a DB visualizer, or if you go out and use DB admin or PHP admin or whatever, PG admin, whatever the varying types of those tools, or Toad or something like that, you can go in, you can quickly browse tables, databases, schemas, whatever it is, store procedures, triggers, look at source code, write code. insert, update records, edit them on the fly, things like that. So those tools definitely have their place, and they are useful. And as a SQL developer, you probably are going to want to keep those tools and use those. However, they're not always going to be available to an application. And the queries you can write are going to be far more powerful than probably every tool, because those tools are going to be solving for a general case where you can write a tuned, specific query for whatever your purposes are. And that sometimes is going to make the difference in something being useful or just sit on a shelf. Particularly these days, as we get into larger data sets, if you can't work with the query language and help itself, basically, so that you can get answers back in a reasonable amount of time, if you're dealing with terabytes of data, that stuff can get out of hand quick. So you want to be able to use this to benefit your applications. You also, like I said, you're not going to be able to use those other tools within applications. Sometimes there's going to be frameworks and libraries, but usually you're going to be better off if you at least understand what's going on underneath the covers, and also if you can write your own like raw SQL queries, because then you can more specifically solve the problems you need to solve and not have a overly large use of resources or time or anything like that. It also can allow you in some cases to get things done faster, because you're not waiting for the quote database team to get some work done. You can actually write the couple of pieces of code you need, and you move forward and you're off and running. Now, as I mentioned, SQL is used in many, many projects across many industries and platforms. You're probably not going to see, you're probably not going to see SQL as a primary job request or position, but you will see database developer or database administrator. And there are, not as a career, not as a salary employee, but as a project, you will see projects that are, hey, we've got problems, database isn't working right, we need somebody to tune or do a performance review of our SQL queries, of our database, and find ways to help us do what we're doing better. So just knowing SQL is great, but actually, we'll say mastering it also has its benefits and can open doors to projects that many people aren't going to touch, because it is one of those things that while SQL is very common, a lot of people know how to do it, when you get into the performance tuning side of it and really writing tight, specific queries, those skills are less common. That's sort of a rarity. Now, the nice thing is it's popular. It's one of the best documented languages out there. Probably every vendor, every database has got some basic SQL documentation sitting out on their site somewhere. You're going to have to watch out for the vendor-specific extensions and tweaks. However, you're going to be able to find examples. You're going to be able to find a lot of tutorials that are generic and also vendor-specific. So if you want content, if you want a way to help yourself learn, SQL is one of those languages. It has got a plethora of options for you to work with. Now, database knowledge in general, and SQL in particular, is also, for those of you that are newer to the development world, they're often a way to separate junior from senior developers, or even mid-level developers. I have seen developers and worked with developers that have limited database skills, a little bit limited, or just a little bit of SQL knowledge. And they really struggle to advance beyond about a mid-level, mid-tier developer job. Because by the time you get to a senior, you're expected to understand data and how to work with it, how it works, how it should work, how to access it, and not be reliant entirely on a framework or a library or a tool or a database developer. So while it is probably not a language you're going to want as your first language, it could be. I mean, you're setting your path up for your career in a specific way. If you start with SQL, it means you're going to be database first probably for your whole career. It's going to be difficult to get out of that. However, once you've settled in on a couple of languages, if you don't have SQL, at least to a level where you're comfortable with it, I, again, strongly recommend take a look at it, spend some time, check some stuff out there, look at some of the documentation so that you do get to a point where you're comfortable with it. It is, in general, better to learn it sooner rather than later. Get in there, spend a little bit of time, even if you're not mastering it, just so you understand the basic idea of what's a select, what's an insert, what's an update look like, what does a where clause look like, how do I order, those kinds of things. And at least what is a trigger, what is a stored procedure, what do those look like, how do I call them? Those are some of the things that I think are going to be very valuable. And sooner rather than later, you will find that it allows you to really expand the type of work you can do, the type of problems you can solve, and the applications you can build. Because you can't be full stack if you don't have some sort of a database knowledge. And usually that's going to be SQL of some sort. Now, the bonus is we do have some classes out on this YouTube. We've got some SQL, whole series of learning SQL, walk through a bunch of examples, do it with MySQL, which is free, easily available. So you don't have to go far to spend a little bit of time. And these are, they're basically 10 to 15 minute snippets of stuff. You could probably spend an hour or two today and in the day being moderately comfortable with SQL, enough that you could get around. And maybe you're not going to be building a database, but at least you can get data out of a database, which, that's probably the important thing initially, because somebody else is, if you don't know it, somebody else will have built it for you. Thanks a lot for your time. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com and go out there and have yourself a great day.
Well, hello, this is Rob with Developreneur, also known as Building Better Developers. Wanted to announce that we have school.developreneur.com. Feel free to check it out if you like any of this information, any of the content that we've sent, and you would like to see more. You can come out, you can enroll for free. We have free courses. We've got places for you to get better at just learning a technology, our how-tos. You can work on your business skills. We can help you with becoming a better developer, as in coding and things like that. A lot of the stuff you've seen on YouTube, we also have out at school.developreneur. We just have it in a little more of a educational format and a way for you to track your progress as you move forward becoming a better developer.